Welcome to today's discussion. And I'm Mark, so I'm the Chief Executive of TribeCX, and I'm delighted to be joined by um, two leading lights in the world of experience delivery. So Jivesh and Stephen from Nissan. I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves in just a minute. But I thought we'd get started with just a little quiz for me. So what I'd like to do is just have a think about this question, please, and just pop your answer into chat, will you? So what percentage of experienced leaders said their organization was succeeding in delivering their customer experience plan or agenda or program or whatever word you want to use around it? 60, 20, 35, 70, 20. All right. The reason I asked that question is because we did some work at the back end of 23 into 24. We validated again at the back end of 24. And what was actually, I think, for me, really quite alarming was that what we saw was that less than 20% of organizations were actually delivering on it. So congrats to those who put down sort of 20%, but it's a little bit concerning that that's where the number is, frankly, from my perspective. And that's why I think today is such an interesting or going to be such an interesting conversation, because what we see is that very few organizations actually manage to deploy experience at scale. They really don't start to think about, so what does managing journeys mean? How do I start to really drive performance? How do I shift the culture across the organization? And just to spare the blushes of Jivesh and Stephen, I know this is something that keeps you guys awake, morning, noon, and night, but yet Nissan are, and we'll hear a lot about this, a long way down this avenue, in terms of where you've been able to get to. And so what we're going to do today is just start to understand a little bit more about what it takes to really achieve that. As with all of our discussions, what I will encourage folks to do is please come off mute, use chat. Let's make this an interactive discussion around it, because I always find that whilst I learn from the folks that are presenting, I also learn from the folks that are attending as well. So I'm sure, I know both Jivesh and Stephen will welcome questions and just different points of view. And actually, how did you do that in practice? Because we're all practitioners around the call, so we know what's there. We're going to come back to this at the back end in terms of talking about journey management, culture, and playbooks. But I did just want to talk for a minute around journey management and just why that's so important. And because for me, journey management is not journey mapping. It's a fundamentally different approach, and I'm sure we'll start to get into some of that. For me, journey management is an operating model. It's a way of existing as an organization. And why that's important is because it requires a strategic commitment to actually choose to operate that way. I think there's a real discipline in terms of execution. We'll hear a little bit from Jivesh and Stephen around, so how did you link journeys to value streams and really how the business makes money around it? And I think it's a mindset. And, that mindset for me is one of continuous improvement, but it's also one of actually we're going to drive a set of business outcomes. We're not doing experience because we want to feel good around it. We're doing experience because it drives revenue growth, it takes cost out, and actually it makes a better place for employees to work, because it optimizes the effort. It focuses effort actually where we get a return in terms of what's going on. So with that sort of backdrop, let me get out of the way and just invite Jivesh and then Stephen maybe just to introduce yourselves, to say hi to the folks on the call. So Jivesh, you want to start?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Jivesh and I'm the customer journey director, or rather, former customer journey director. We have going through a reorg in the organization recently, and I will be now moving to a new role where I'll be heading the data platforms team. Yeah, I've been at Nissan for about 6 years in various capacities in in global and regional and market roles,
Yep.
but largely been within the CX function.
Great. Thanks, Jivesh. And Stephen, you want to say hi to folks?
I was trying to be good because we're not far from St. Thomas's Hospital here, and so we get a lot of ambulances going by. So I was trying to be cognizant of that. Stephen Ryden-Lloyd. I've been with Nissan for 8 years now, and have background mostly in the field of digital product development and digital media experiences. I've run our digital product team here, and now I'm the journey director for what we call the vehicle sales and customer journey.
Great. Okay. So I guess, I mean, maybe a good place to start is, I know the Nissan story somewhat, but maybe let's just wind the clock back a little bit. And why did you start to get into journeys, and why did you start to get into journey management? Yeah. So what drove that?
Yeah, I think CX was important at Nissan maybe even like 10 years ago.
Yep.
And like CX was driven by each individual function. So marketing team, after sales team, dealer network development team, everyone was driving CX independently, and they were essentially working in silos. But I think it was back in 2018 where there was an independent survey done, independent assessment of our customer experience capabilities.
Yep.
And one of the key findings that we found out was that it was our inability to work as journey within journey teams and focus on the customer that was kind of hampering our ability to deliver a cohesive customer experience. And I think we knew as a business, we knew this intuitively as a CX team, which was fairly small at that time. We knew this intuitively because, I mean, when you go on the website, you have a different team that's trying to deliver a finance experience. You have a different team on the same website that's trying to deliver an after sales experience, and they actually were not talking to each other. But I think it was during that time, combined with the survey, so 2019 was when Nissan launched their customer experience 2.0, which was we ran a big audit. We integrated well with our markets to really identify what were these customer journeys, and 7 customer journeys were identified. And of course, these were like at a very high level. What are the 7 customer journeys based on the customer jobs to be done?
Mm-hmm.
And even at that stage, it wasn't just a structural change. It was meant to be more of a mindset shift. It meant to increase our cross-functional collaboration, align the business on KPIs, priorities, outcomes, and more importantly, outputs. And it meant that how these cross-functional teams could start working together to deliver customer outcomes. And yeah, I mean, since then we have essentially gone through a number of iterations. I mean, I wouldn't say that we completely nailed it at the first start. I think Stephen was around back in the inception of customer journey management back in 2019. So he's the OG here.
I mean, I appreciate your honesty here, Jivesh, yeah, because I don't think anybody that's in this space who says we've got it nailed is telling the truth, yeah. And secondly, I think it's not a plain sailing. It's not, I'll just get out a recipe book and yeah, we'll get it right first time. You've got to adjust and things around that. But
yeah,
what's fascinating, if I can for a minute, is just come back to, so I'm imagining I've got this global organization. Lots of people are doing things around experience. Yeah, some folks are doing mapping, some folks are doing surveys. There's some insights, there's a bit of research, there's design that's happening. There's all sorts of stuff, yeah, that's going on. And I'm sure the folks on the call are sort of nodding as well to say that's what my life, looks like, feels like, etc. around it. Yeah. And so you said you did a sort of capability assessment. Yeah. People came and had a look at, okay, how are we doing? Yeah. And what was interesting was, we can't work. We're not working in a way, yeah, that is aligned around the customer. At that point, Jivesh or Stephen, was there anything that was done to say, and if we were to solve that, it would allow us to grow this amount, or it would allow us to take this amount of cost out, or it would allow us, yeah, were there sort of business performance measures that were sort of connected to this?
And do you want me to let me jump in, Jivesh? So building upon what Jivesh has said, and the surveys and the consultancy and the input that we had at the time, our mission at the start, Mark, Jivesh mentioned this, was that we mapped out a set of maturity phases for our customer experience at Nissan. And we, as Jivesh said, we called it C 1.0, C 2.0, and C 3.0.
Yep.
C 1.0, and this is one of the significant advantages that we have as an organization, was to build a global digital platform. One of our powers, one of our strengths as an organization is that our digital experience in over 140 countries in the world is managed centrally in one team. We'll come back to this perhaps a little bit later, but when you talk about rolling out experience at scale, that is exactly what we do. But the other thing that comes with that is a vast amount of data. And that's also a significant power that we have, which is why Jivesh is now making the evolution that he just said, and to think about how we connect that data to customer data, to offline data, to all sorts of other data sets. But when we mapped out CE 1.0, building the digital foundation, CE 2.0, moving into the world of customer journeys and thinking about how to deploy journeys, we then mapped out, as you say, a vision of CE 3.0. And our vision for CE 3.0, we're not there yet, as Jivesh said. Our vision for CE 3.0 is to be ranked amongst the best customer experience organizations in the world, effectively to be considered alongside Apple, alongside other organizations. A long way to go to get there. For CE 2.0, the challenge for us was not about impacting business at that time. CE 3.0 is about impacting business in terms of business metrics, in terms of metrics the business understand. CE 2.0 was solving the customer's pain. That was our ambition. We did an enormous amount of research about what is the friction, where is the friction that customers experience when they're interacting with Nissan digitally and in the dealership, through the finance arm, through all sorts of other avenues. And so our mission at that time was to solve the pain. And our ambition from solving the pain was that we would have more loyal and more satisfied customers who are more likely to convert and become buyers and owners of our vehicles. And then we could build upon that and map all of the data points that would allow us to come from that. So we can talk some more about how we're approaching it now, because now we are definitely looking at how we bridge from customer experience to business value. But just to answer your question, at that time, it really was about solving customer pain and friction. And once we removed that, then we felt we could take the next step.
But as you talk, Stephen, and I think it's great. Yeah, I mean, clearly, sort of three big steps that you want to take. Yeah, we want to go digital. We want to focus around 7 journeys and take the pain out for customers. Yeah, and then we want to make sure we get the business impact. Yeah, around it, and just having that clarity in terms of how you want to go through those steps. Yeah, starts to help. I'm sure it helps drive alignment. Yeah, with folks. Yeah, that great question from Yasma on the chat. Yeah, about getting everybody aligned or onto the same page around this. Yeah, we see organizations that do this top down. The chief exec says, he, she, or they say, thou shalt. Yeah, we see it bubble up. I mean, what sort of approach did you take at Nissan to get people aligned?
Yeah, I think our CE 2.0 and our journey management approach was both top down and bottom up.
Okay.
We went through a very intensive process to understand customer pain points, customer jobs to be done, and got extensive and comprehensive market feedback from market stakeholders, essentially people who are working much more closer to the actual customers, including dealerships. And so through this like bottom up, top down process, I think that's how we defined the customer journeys, the 7 customer journeys back in 2018. And essentially, those 7 customer journeys and improvement plans for those 7 customer journeys is what essentially served as our strategy for customer experience 2.0. And also just highlighting another lens of what Stephen was mentioning earlier is that when we got started out, I think having that clarity and having our teams just focusing on customer pain points and what can we do for the customer. We were a small, scrappy team, and really trying to solve customer pain points and problems really helped us to build credibility within the organization. And I think that's really important. And even if you look at our journey over the last since 2019 and 20, you can kind of like break it down into like 3 eras. The startup era, where we were a small team, the integration era, where journeys became more embedded in the businesses,
Yep.
and now the value era, where our own articulation of how customer journeys contribute to business is being tested, and we are kind of like making a good case for it. We now we are able to run business cases. We have organized ourselves around how to deliver value in a consistent manner.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of really interesting takeaways, Jivesh. I mean, for folks that are listening now, or I'm sure folks who come back to this, I mean, they're like gold nuggets, that you just you very kindly share, but I want to make sure people hear them, around it, because you said, okay, we got 7 journeys, we got all the research and started to understand where the customer pain really was. Now, lots of people do that, but what they don't do is the next step, which you said is we prioritized them and took action with the business, and that built confidence. Yeah. That built trust in your scrappy team. Yeah. I mean, that was, you show me the impact, show me the change, and people go, whoa, okay. Yeah, we'll have some more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think it doesn't have to be a massive transformation, but you have to organizations are impatient. I mean, I don't know about other organizations, but Nissan is extremely impatient and almost in a sense neurotic. And they want to see results, and you have to in a short period of time be able to demonstrate some outcomes. Are you improving conversion rate? Are you improving satisfaction? What impact does this initiative have on either a business lever or a customer lever? I don't know if you want to add anything there, Stephen.
I'll add in after the next question, actually, Jivesh, and you covered quite a lot.
Great. Okay. Well, what's interesting is, I mean, you start to deliver, and I can see that generating some interest. Yeah. And there's a couple of questions around momentum and how do you start to sustain momentum? Yeah, because I guess what I see with lots of organizations is they start playing whack-a-mole, or what I would describe as whack-a-mole. Yeah, so you imagine we go down the fair. Yeah, the whack-a-mole machines there are smack, I hit that one. Oh yeah, I fixed that. Smack, I hit that one. Yes, oh, I've solved that. Yeah. But it doesn't actually, the organization doesn't seem to move forward. We seem to be very busy fixing lots of things, yeah, but we don't actually seem to be improving the overall experience. But it sounds as though, your 7 journeys, your understanding of jobs to get done, it wasn't whack-a-mole, it was a more concerted effort. So maybe talk a little bit around how you got to that point and started to sustain momentum.
You want me to jump in, Jivesh? I'll do that. I mean, there's some comments I've been making in the chat, Mark, as we were talking. But one of the things that I think that we're actually quite good at doing is taking a short-term and a long-term view concurrently. And that prevents the over-whacking, for want of a better term. And yes, you do have to whack-a-mole virtually all the time because a problem comes up, something goes down, some experience breaks. Customer voice of customer tells you that something is not working for them, and you have short-term attention to fix that. But at the same time, we work on 3-year planning cycles, and within those planning cycles, we set visions for what we want to do, and we set underneath that vision, we create a set of strategic objectives, and we create a set of measurements and outcomes for what those strategic objectives should deliver to us as an organization. And we set ourselves, increasingly, one of the things that we're doing, which we didn't used to do, is we're setting ourselves targets about how we impact both the customer and the business. And that's a very difficult, actually, evolution part, because and it's something I think I was going to say perhaps to a later question, but I will cover it now. And I'm talking about being in a traditional manufacturing business. Nissan's a 90-year-old company. In many ways, it's a very traditional organization that's facing humongous challenges at the moment with the speed of product development, with the threat of competition, with other events, other things that are impacting our business. But in CX specifically, when a lot of our professionals, and this is what I'm talking about, if you're a pure digital retail organization, then this is probably different. But in a traditional business like ours, it's certainly true that a lot of our CX professionals come from a digital marketing background or a digital platform development background. And these are people who have great skills. We have a great team. We have many professionals in that team. And a lot of the way that they think and act is based upon traditional digital media metrics. So you're converting visitors to sales, increasing our KPA and our KPI performance on the digital platform. Not a lot of our people in our CX profession speak and understand how the business itself measures success. We have a very specific and probably, every organization likes to say they're different, and the differences are relatively minor, but we have some quirks and general differences. But we have a very specific way we measure profitability on vehicle sales. And very few of our professionals in the CX team understand that. So they find it very difficult converting a web metric, a web KPI, into a business KPI. And that's a pain that we're going through at the moment, is trying to understand how we do that. To help us get along that road and to bridge that gap, and I think we made this comment about, and Jivesh made this comment about how do we demonstrate our value to the business. We created a metric where we ascribe the volume of sales to our digital channel. An interesting way of doing that, because actually pretty much 100% of our customers touch our digital channels at some point in time. But do we ascribe every visitor to every sale? That's a contentious thing within the business. So we created a very specific way of saying we can track this customer through their digital journey into our dealerships through to the close of the sale. And we report on this to our top executives on a very frequent basis. And we report the growth and the contribution of that. And now we're trying to change that into thinking about not just how do we track the volume, but how do we track the value? And now the next painful progression of that is actually to your slide at the start of the presentation, is how do we show the incremental value of what we do? And then that tracks back again, it's full circle to the customer journey. Because we know in the customer journey where we can optimize experiences that help us to retain loyal customers better, or help us to appeal to the more digitally savvy, the more credit-worthy customer, the customer who's likely to buy a higher priced vehicle or add specific high-priced options to that. Then we can understand both from the data that we have, the business knowledge and the value proposition that we have, and we can apply that into the customer journey so that we can prove that incremental value. And I won't obviously give away any details about how we're doing that. Very much part of my world because I'm looking after e-commerce, and of course we're trying to do that. But that progression is actually quite painful in a traditional business to figure out. And a lot of the business has been run for 90 years, and the profit center sits over here or sits over here, and they look at us and go, well, you're not a sales channel, you're not a profit center. Why are you claiming, credit for my sales? So it's a lot of kind of stakeholder engagement, a lot of alignment goes along with that to get to a point where people buy in to what you're doing and what value you bring to them. I mean, that's a long answer to your question.
No, but there's some really insightful elements of that, Stephen, because I'm sitting there. You said, I'll paraphrase, but CX leaders typically don't understand how the business makes money.
In a traditional business, I say. I mean, I fully recognize if you're a pure digital retailer, you're one and the same.
Yeah, but I mean, I had the pleasure of meeting leaders, experienced leaders across the globe, from hundreds of different brands, and actually, I think that is true, Stephen. I think a lot of experienced leaders, unfortunately, talk in a language of we're going to improve the experience, the CSAT, the Net Promoter Score, the customer effort score, and a business talks in dollars and cents, and customer lifetime value, and time to replacement or time to revenue, whatever the metrics are. And actually, as a CX leader, taking that time to actually to really understand how my business makes money and how people talk about my business being successful is a really important element, because then I can look at the experience and go, if I change the experience, I can see that through. Now I know it's not an easy thing to prove, but I can start to at least align the language and my actions in that way. I mean, that's a really important element that we see around that. You also talked about sort of a slightly tongue-in-cheek, Stephen, I think, comment around taking credit. You heard people said, "How do you in e-commerce?" How can you demonstrate? Because it's the dealers that do all the sales or whatever. However the system works, but maybe just expand a little bit around that, because I see Krishna's asking a couple of questions in chat around that area.
I think again, and then Jivesh, you may have some thoughts on this as well. It starts by understanding as you rightly said, how people in the business think about value, and it's not so much taking credit was kind of like tongue-in-cheek comment. It's not about actually taking credit, but it's about trying to look at drivers of incremental value for people. Now, one of the interesting, I actually loathe talking about the pandemic. I just want to forget it ever happened and then it move on. But one of the things that happened during the pandemic in the automotive world in the USA was that there's a benchmark in the USA that a salesperson in a dealership on average sells 11 to 12 vehicles per month. Okay. During the pandemic, that shot up to 16 or 18 vehicles because, of course, what happened is that the digital experience became more central to the buying process. Now, if you can talk about, I use that as as an example. If I then go to our dealer network team and say, hang on a minute, now what we've done, because a customer can do more of their shopping journey online, your people have a higher throughput rate in terms of vehicle sales per salesperson, and they can have more valuable conversations with the customer to satisfy them or to demonstrate the benefits of features of their car or their connectivity, which lead to incremental sales. If you can prove some of those points, that's what I mean about sort of demonstrating value. We also know, for example, and without giving away any figures, the customers who buy online with us tend to buy higher priced cars. And so once we can track that data and we can go to the people who are responsible for reporting on the sales and the revenue and the volume figures, we can point to this and say, well, look, people coming through this channel, it might not be the biggest one you have at the moment, but look at this interesting data. And then you bring them on board, you get their success. And once we started to do that, then we get our global sales colleagues that are promoting our activity through their sales teams in all of the markets and the regions. And so we end up working as one big team. But you can't do that, as you rightly say, you can't do that if they look at you as being, well, this is just fluffy customer experience and they're just building websites or they're doing wonderful things like that. You just have to get down and talk dirty, in terms of those value drivers.
Well, I mean, 11 to 12 a month to 16 to 18 a month, is a 40% lift.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is not a rounding error. This is, fundamental step change, in terms of
you just have to hunt for the metrics that resonate with people, and you don't find them on a first pass, but you just have to hunt for them. And a large part of my life is trying to think about those kinds of things. And Jivesh, I don't know if you want to add, when we make an investment in the customer data ecosystem, we're trying to do the same kind of demonstration.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think this is probably a good time to tell the story. So we know that customers spend anywhere between 7 to 8 hours online before they walk into the dealership. And one of the big customer pain points was that there was a huge amount of frustration that they had to restart this process at the dealership. And by just simply connecting the online and offline journeys, customers were able to send their preferences, their car configurations to two dealerships in Mexico. Now, what we noticed, of course, was typical CX metrics improve where customers are more satisfied. But I think when we told the story to our executives, one of the reasons why it resonated so much was because we demonstrated that it actually helped to reduce the time to sales. So when this information was in the dealership used for providing a personalized experience, we saw that it reduced the time to sales by 5 days. So on average, buying a cycle for a customer from the time they land on the website to actually buying in the dealership is about 42 days. But for these customers, where they received this personalized experience at the dealership, they bought faster. They bought faster and they converted at a higher rate. Now, that is an example of taking a customer pain point, building a digital product that solves that customer pain point, and demonstrating impact on business, on a business outcome. Of course, it clearly shows that customers are more happy and the VOC at the dealership improved. But that's not the point. The point here is that we turned our inventory at a faster rate and we converted a customer faster.
And I love that, because you've gone looking for the metrics that really matter. Time to revenue. Number of sales that are happening. That people are typically coming through that channel or buying at a higher price point. So there's a profitability uplift as well. But equally, you're making the experience better for me as a customer, because what you're doing, if I understand it rightly, is you're demonstrating that actually you've listened to what I've been doing online. And you've taken all of that information and you've made that available to the dealer. So I don't have to repeat myself, because if I have to repeat myself, that's a pretty poor experience. But what you're doing is you're demonstrating, hang on a minute, I know you've invested time in our brand, you've interacted with our brand. We're going to demonstrate we know you, we care about you, we understand you. Yeah, and it's just a continuation of that journey. And so many businesses fall down at that junction. Yeah, I mean, this isn't a challenge around the cars. Yeah, I mean, this is a great insight for me, no matter which industry that I'm stepping into. You know, if you can demonstrate you know me, you care about me, you understand me, and you allow me to change channels, with ease, then that's a great thing to be doing. Because what you're doing is you're meeting a set of needs that I have, and it's not, I don't have a need just to buy a car. I have a need to feel valued, feel unique, feel special, feel, and there's a whole series of things that are in that around it. Be interesting to see what the dealers, what was their response and reaction to the work that you were doing.
I mean, just taking this the previous example, I think connecting this online and offline journey is quite hard. It's a really hard problem to solve for a wide variety of reasons. I mean, I think if anyone who's gone to a dealership, they understand that people who work there, they know what they're doing. They don't want to change their practice. They because they interact with customers, they believe, and I do think that they know their customers the best. When we were trying to solve this problem, I think we tried using a shared customer pain point. Like, okay, we are working together trying to solve one pain point. We try to co-create the solution. I think if I would have done this again, I probably would have done more of that co-creation with the dealers and actually the salespeople on the ground, and used more of their language. Essentially, what are you? How would you like to solve this problem? What would you like, and how do I incorporate the solution within their workflow itself? The first MVP that we built out, it meant that the dealer salesperson had to click on a particular link, and that was already one step too far. That was already how do I serve up this information in their existing workflow, and not just their existing workflow, but serve distilled information and make recommendations. I think this is also part about that customer experience design. So thinking about the salesperson's experience there, so how employee experience essentially impacts customer experience. So this was an iterative process. I think we took a few iterations, and the reason why dealership like this online offline challenges is challenging is because you have to get approval from dealer boards before you go do anything.
Sure.
Any implementation is a 3 to 6 month implementation that requires a ramp up of training. So these are long implementations, and they are not essentially quick wins, I would say.
Yeah.
So if you are prioritizing CX initiatives, a CX initiative with a dealership may not be like a quick win. Also because when you're trying to measure impact, it is very, very hard to actually run A/B tests and get enough data for statistical significance to like confidently say we impacted conversion rate because of this initiative at these dealerships.
Right. As you're talking, Jivesh and Stephen, I'm also reminded, my own background was, Shell, and there's 44,000 locations that people pump gasoline from. And interestingly, when we started to understand that actually people don't come to a gas station to buy gas. They come to a gas station because they're wanting to do commute, or they're wanting to go and visit family, or they're wanting to do one of life's journeys. Your role in that suddenly starts to change, and the solutions that you start to identify changes. And that integration of what you do online and offline at the station, and that whole mix, yeah, it really starts to change. And it sounds as though, you know, you've got a very similar approach, which was, hang on a minute, the role that we need to play here, yeah, is the role that our customers want to do particular jobs, yeah, as they go through their journey, and what is it that we can do, yeah, to help them, whether that's online or in the dealers or whatever, yeah, it happens to be around it. It's maybe just to shift gear for a minute, because you know, I can imagine that you're doing these pockets of improvement. And then how do you start to scale? Because I mean, I should know the numbers, but you know, the number of cars that are sold or the number of countries you operate in, I mean, I'm sure it is mind blowing, yeah, the sort of size and scale. But you know, you're talking about, I think, Stephen, you said digital was centrally managed, you know, does that give you an opportunity to help you, you know, start to scale and repeat? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are multiple ways, Mark. I think you touched on some at the beginning, but one way that we look at scaling is through increasing focus on the integration of customer journeys and the seamless handoff from one step to another. Yeah, it's not purely scaling, but one of the things that we have to evolve, for example, is we started with 7 journeys. We now effectively have 2 journeys. We call them vehicle sales, and we call it ownership. Within that, we hide a lot of different sub journeys and jobs to be done, and all of the rest of it. But we increasingly focus on how we bring the whole journey together. But the second is, and this is a distinct advantage and a distinct capability that we have, is that when we roll out a journey step that is delivered through our digital channel, we have the ability, it's not quite the press of a button, but it's not far off the press of a button, that we can deploy that in global markets because we have that scale of digital platform. And that's a really, really powerful thing. To do that, of course, we do a lot of the traditional things that we do. We do a lot of testing. We do a lot of customer insight. We do a lot of research. We might do A/B testing. We might run other types of testing and so forth. But we have that opportunity. One thing you touched on at the beginning as well is playbooks. Playbooks are very important. So you can take something that's quite straightforward, which is we look at what is, say, the next best action for a customer, dependent upon what we know about the customer and what they're doing. And deploying a feature like that at scale can be somewhat simple. Getting to that point can be quite complex in terms of understanding what the actual next best action is. But when we deploy a quite a complete journey, like a car buying journey online, that's the sort of like the implementation of many journey moments, many capabilities, many features of our product suite. And so we do use playbooks to help us to both accelerate that, shorten the time to market, and deliver to more of the markets that we have around the world. So those things are very important to us. Also, I think, you know, we touched on this before, working in partnership with other parts of the business. I think, Jivesh, you touched on this earlier when talking about the dealers. The reality is that, you know, we don't own our customer contract. We're not Tesla. We don't sell direct to customer. We do in one market in the world where we're piloting this, but we don't own a customer. You know, the contract that the customer signs is with their dealer, never with Nissan, or never with Nissan Europe or Nissan Global. So we have to work in partnership with people as much as possible to do that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of businesses that are the way they get to market is through a dealership or through financial advisors or through, I mean, the gas stations in the energy business, and the majority of those are franchises, or dealer-owned, activities. So, you're reliant on and that shift of we want the dealers to be successful is an interesting mindset shift. Yeah, I mean, it's not we want to exploit that to get to the end customer. It's actually we want that dealership to be really successful because we know
Absolutely.
when the dealership is successful. Yeah.
And some of our dealers are parts of large multi-billion-dollar businesses, especially in the USA. They're sophisticated businesses. They know how to market. They have very good technical capabilities themselves. So, we have to work very, very closely with them.
I mean, I could talk for hours and hours and hours about this, Stephen, and Jivesh, and we will, but I've also got one eye on the clock, just around this. So, I mean, just to wrap this up, I'm just intrigued around, you said C3.0, yeah? This is where you're heading, or this is the next wave of where you're going. So what does that entail? What's next?
Jivesh, or shall I? I think let me just add very, very briefly. C3.0 to us is representative of two things. Firstly, we want our customers. We have a saying internally. Customers, compare the experience of Nissan to their best-in-class experience across industries. They don't look at us compared to Toyota, to Rolls-Royce, to Tesla. They look at us compared to Nike, to IKEA, to what Marriott Bonvoy is doing for them with their AI assistants or whatever. So the first thing is we want customers to think about us in those terms. We're still a long way from that. We acknowledge that. The second is we want to use CX as a driver of future revenue. That's the real outcome. In the automotive world, some people will know on this call, the traditional way that we accrue revenue is being challenged by different business models. If autonomous driving becomes something of the reality of the future, nobody's going to buy a car. Cars will be bought by big finance companies and just dropped on your doorstep when you need them. We have to think into the future. We have to think about the changing revenue model around electric vehicles and what additional services. And some of those things we can only do online. If you're talking about vehicle-to-grid technology, you need to be able to control that through some digital experience and enable that through some digital experience. If you're talking about insurance services based upon driving behavior and so forth, that's a very data-driven business. So a lot of these things, are the frontier for what we're moving into, because we are really now positioned to be the forefront of the enabler of those future revenue streams. And so best-in-class experience, driver of future revenue.
Sign me up, Stephen. I'm there. Yeah, I think this is that. I think it's wonderful. Yeah, I mean to recognize that and to set that ambition that says actually the wider marketplace is setting our customers' expectation, and so that's what we need to compete against. It's not about being better than, I don't know, Audi or VW or whoever around it. It's about being as good, if not better, than the Disneys, the Nikes, the folks of the world, and that connecting experience to real value delivery. It's a core part of how the organization performs. It's a core part of how the organization really makes its profitability. It's a core part of how employees are attracted to come to and stay and develop inside of the organization around it. We're going to have you back at another date to talk about all the work you're doing around AI and data, and I'm sure that's a whole other conversation. But guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate your candor, your transparency, your openness today, and to the folks online. And maybe just a couple of things. I mean, for me, coming out of this, what I take away is a real focus on getting the organization to focus on what matters, whether that's in individual journeys, individual touch points, connecting journeys together. I mean, focus on what makes a difference around it. I heard as you were going through this, there was that you're constantly thinking about stretching that ambition in terms of where you're wanting to do, but you're also making sure that actually what you're doing is you're building motivation and commitment, but not just within, it's not the CX team, it's not the broader just Nissan, it's also the everybody who's part of that customer's journey in terms of what you're doing. And that it's clear that what you're driving is a step change in performance. You've delivered a step change and you continue to deliver that step change around that. So look, for folks that want to continue to engage in this conversation, there's a link there, please. We'll do that. We'll share a summary around this. But my thank you, Jivesh and Stephen, once again, for being so generous in terms of both your time and sharing your insights and experience. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone that joined us today. We'll leave it there.
It was really great having the insights from the chat as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.